Hello world! I am back with another episode of 3 Candid Questions. Episode 10. Wow, already 10 episodes. I had the pleasure to interview Vienne, who is the founder and CEO of VienneMilano. A very interesting company, filling a gap, especially in the US market. You will hear more about that once you jump into the conversation. It was very interesting just to talk to her about how to build a business, how to run a business, how to be a mother and a business owner, and how to prioritize. And at the end of the conversation, actually, you will hear a child crying because, yes, that's reality of a working mother. That might happen sometimes in meetings and even in podcast episodes. So enjoy the conversation. Let me know what you think and what you took away. And if you want to support us, leave a donation. You find the link everywhere in the audio and in the video content. Speak soon. Hi, Vienne. So nice to have you.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's awesome that you could make time. So let's see where the conversation takes us today. But before we go into the deeper topics, and when we first connected, we talked about so many interesting things. So we'll see what will fit into this podcast today. But I would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and also talk about what you do.
Sure. Hello. I'm Vienne of VienneMilano. I created or founded VienneMilano 10 years ago. At the time, I couldn't find stockings that I could wear for every occasion. Especially here in the United States, the type of stockings that I'm talking about are thigh-high stockings. And here in the US, thigh-high stockings are mainly worn for Halloween or they don't stay up. So I did some research. I traveled to Italy. I designed and I sourced and everything from there, and I continue to do so today. And so here I am. We've been in business for 10 years now, and we're growing.
Awesome.
And yeah, so yeah, that's who I am.
Mm-hmm. So
officially, but at a high level, summary.
That's the businesswoman.
Yeah.
Vienne, who started like her own stockings business and sort of filled a gap that you experienced yourself, which is super interesting. So how did you get to that point that you said, oh, I can't take this anymore. I really want to fill that gap with my own business?
I think even deeper than that, right? Let's go back a little bit further. Like, not everybody who recognizes a gap makes that jump immediately, right? And
Yes.
I think there was a woman who's, she's still around, so she's not was a woman. There is a woman who I met before I started my business, and she was the first woman, she still is the first woman to climb all 7 summits of the world. And, when you ask her, why did she do that? Her answer was, well, I don't want to look back when I'm 70 years old and that, okay, well, I could have done this. I should have done that. I didn't want to look back in my life with regret. It's more outstanding for her to be able to look back and think about her accomplishments. And I say for her because when I turn 70, I don't think I feel the need to say I've finished climbing all 7 summits.
Yes.
So she has a different goal, but that message stuck with me, which is, okay, I can stay in corporate America. I could, make a lot of money and I could do this just like anybody else, but I really want to. And so I think through that lens, filling a gap that I thought was apparent in the hosiery business, at least in the US, became more enticing for me to solve this problem, if you will, and start my business.
Yeah. So it was that one message, probably also other things that came into it, but that really stuck with you.
Yes,
that's super
absolutely.
interesting. And then how did you get the courage to really start designing, sourcing, traveling to Italy and making it all work? Where did that courage and the drive then come from?
I was ready, honestly. I think at the time I recognized that time was limited. I wasn't married at the time. I didn't have children. These are things that I knew I wanted one day. But I also know that if I were married and did have kids, it would be a lot harder for me to get, start a business. There are a lot of great people that are able to do that, and I applaud them. I just don't know if I would be able to do the same. So I was just like, I got to take advantage of this time right now. So
Yes. Yeah. And then what would you say were the major challenges when you started doing all this? Things that you had to overcome, maybe even in your own mind. I don't know whether there were production issues, just tell us a little how that early journey was for you.
It's funny because if you had asked me this question when I first started, I would more or less tell you a similar story. But I think now that I can view things through, a longer journey, if you will, I
Yes.
recognize more of the challenges that I faced that I didn't even realize. So
Interesting.
I think one thing that well, first of all, let's go back to my background a little bit. So I came from my tech. I wasn't from the fashion world. I had spent a lot of time in my career in product management and launching, whether it be a website or software or whatever. And I also worked in .com business, but that's kind of different from what I do today. It had all the right pieces, just it wasn't the big picture of what I'm doing, or it didn't offer the skills to do what I'm doing today. So when I first arrived in Italy, I met with many, many suppliers. Literally at the time, my former business partner and I, we picked up the phone book and just called, folks in Italy to make appointments to see, okay, who's available, can you meet with us, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the conversation that had come up was that, hey, if me, going to start a business focused on women in the US, you should really just focus on the color black, because American women mostly buy black stockings. And I thought, well, that's really boring. Like I consider myself to be American, so like I would wear other colors. So I said, no, forget about it. Like I'm gonna launch my first collection with all these colors, which we did. But at the end of the day, he wasn't wrong. Like black is still it continues to be our best seller. But we're learning too, though, that color is just it's I wouldn't say Americans don't buy other colors. It's finding that right color is more of an art than a science, I think. That's, I think, the part that I'm learning as I can think back to this 10-year journey of, okay, it's not just black. It's being able to have that experience and luck in some ways too, to find that color that does really well with your customers.
Yeah, interesting. And what I hear too, which I think is a very important part for anyone who is listening now thinking about starting their own business, is picking up the phone and literally doing the work, doing the hard work of talking to people like, can we meet up as suppliers and so on. So it sounds to me like it was a very hands-on journey also in the beginning.
It continues to be. I think that's who I am. I like to build relationship with people. And so I know it's especially with COVID, it can be a little difficult with that. But especially in Italy, a country which I've traveled before starting this business, I know that it is a country with a lot of farms. And so, I wanted to see, okay, is this manufacturing plant next to a farm? Is it what kind of farm is it? Is it some kind of animal byproduct? And does that smell get to this? I don't know. It just all kind of crazy things that you weren't sure at the time, especially since this wasn't your background. And so it really did. It does continue to help to have that face-to-face interaction with people you work with.
And also to make sure, what I hear from you, like it's important when you have something in mind that you want to create in your business, to make sure that all the circumstances sort of fit what you want to create? And
Oh,
as you
yeah.
say, like the smell, or maybe, you know, what type of plant it is, or
Yeah. Well,
similar.
actually, before, meeting the suppliers, so, I mean, just to kind of chart out the timeline, it was 2011 January when I first started working on the brand positioning and what we want to build the the brand to be, because
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like, I didn't want to meet manufacturers without, like, hey, and a formal introduction, especially since, um, I mean, now might be different, but at the time, I'm not sure if everybody was receptive to the idea of, hey, here I am, a Chinese American girl coming to start a business. Can I buy some of your stuff? Can I
Yeah.
design stuff and have you manufacture it? I'm pretty sure not everybody was receptive to it. So we
Mm-hmm.
look put together, and having that, okay, who do we want to be presentation, we had like a slide with prototype pictures and stuff put together, um, ready, so that when we did talk to these manufacturers, we had something for them to look at.
Yes, yes. And that sparks another very interesting question and thought in my mind about identity, you know, the identity of your business and what it represents, like the Italy manufacturing, and which I'm sure represents like high quality for women when they buy your products. And you, as a Chinese American lady, how do you show up in your business?
That's a
How does your identity play into it?
that's a very good question. So it
Mhm.
continues to be something where I ask myself, right, what do I want to
Mm,
do? Because when I first began, I think about a lot of brands, and do you often see the person behind the brand? Victoria's Secret, there's no Victoria. There may be one, a long, long time ago.
mm,
Yes, Donna Karan, there is a Donna Karan New York, DKNY, but again, how often do you see her?
mm,
Do we even know how she looks like? I think in recent time, more and more you start to see like Calvin Klein come out, like Ralph Lauren, but that's totally they're a different genre, different league
mm,
already. So, the point is it about the brand and the image, or the founder of the company? And
mm,
for a very long time, I kind of shy away from being seen because of many, many reasons. One of which is because I cannot change the fact that I am Asian. You know, I,
mhm.
I cannot, get a rhinoplasty.
Well,
um,
you could. The question is whether you want to, right?
yeah, I guess so, right. So the question has definitely come up, like, hey, you are Chinese, so are your hosiery made in China, or are you made
Mm.
in Asia? And you're like, no, I didn't. Did you just hear what I just said? Like, I go,
Yeah, it's Italy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so anyway, so it's also a lot for human mind to comprehend. I understand that part. I think I don't want to say people are blah blah blah. I just think that's a complicated story. People just want to keep things simple. Like,
Hmm.
so your stockings are made in Italy, but you live in America, but you're really Chinese. That's a lot to
Yeah.
comprehend. A lot of people get it too, but I think at the same time, it could also be a lot to take in. And so,
Mm.
what does that mean for me? Well, I think generally I just try to avoid this topic, I
Mm.
guess, in my brand. Sometimes you see me in like the blog and stuff, but that's about it.
Yeah. So your brand is represented by the models who wear your stockings, or someone else maybe doing an interview, or how do you then?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the folks you see wearing our hosiery are influencers and models that,
Mm.
we're collaborating with or have hired to wear our hosiery. Um, I, of course, wear my stockings, and in the past, there were pictures of me wearing my stockings, but I don't think it did
Mhm.
And I don't think it did a favor. And I think friends were like, I recognize your legs. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So I obviously do think that like no one else in the world is going to vouch for you except for yourself. And I do wear my stockings all the time. But I think having somebody who looks the part, who, looks better, maybe a better fit for our brand. And that's ultimately why, there are such a thing called models. That's why companies hire models to do that stuff. That's their profession.
Yeah. So, and then where would you say that it sounds to me like there's a very conscious decision on, okay, you show up and making business decisions and doing, all the CEO important stuff, but you don't show up representing the company as such or the brand?
Well, I do. I mean, I'm here now, and I'm talking
That's
to
true.
Lauren. And I've been to a number of events where I do talk about my brand, but will you see me on Instagram? Maybe one out of 35 pictures or something.
Yes.
That I think is the part where I don't necessarily feel the need to be at all the time.
So you choose very carefully where you show up and where it makes sense for you.
Exactly. Completely. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's another very good thought for, anyone who's in business or trying to start a business, wanting to start a business, like make a very conscious decision where it makes sense to be there and where it makes sense maybe for someone else to represent or to show up, and depending with what business you have. But I'm still curious, like, this thought about identity, it's because I'm thinking, if you sometimes have to worry about, will people get my story, how does that make you feel, as the person Vienne, as opposed to the business lady Vienne, who can maybe rationalize?
Yeah, well, actually, I want to go back to that previous point. I have, on the other hand, met, it could be a lingerie store owner, or I have had met founders who have the luxury of using themselves in their story and their marketing material. And that's great. To my earlier point, like, no one is going to vouch more for your business than you. But at the same time, it's just, really just finding what is appropriate, what's a good fit. And I'm like, I think we can do this for us.
Yes.
But what was your question? Your question is?
Yeah, my question was still around the same point. Like, I feel like the business Vienne is very, very strategic in how she decides to show up and where it makes sense for the business. So I was wondering, this whole thing, this worry sometimes about, will people get it? Will it confuse people? Like my story, how does it make Vienne the person then feel? That there might be that.
That's a good question. Sometimes, sometimes it's like, okay, whatever, just do it. Maybe I'm overthinking.
Yeah.
But it really depends. But I do think that more often than not, I have to remind myself that successful entrepreneurs, they just say, oh, F it, just do it,
Yeah.
Does Elon Musk think about, okay, do people just think I'm the PayPal guy, who does so many things, or some of these other, I think they're just really unapologetically about, where they, actually Elon Musk is probably an example of that too. Like, he's Canadian, he's South African, he lives in the West, and so, I think at some point I just like, I'm thinking about this too much. Who's the audience? Who's listening here? Maybe they will get it, and just stick with the message, stick with what I need to do, more importantly.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point you're bringing. It seems like sometimes, there's a difference between what reality really is, because all our stories are sort of a little complicated if we think about it, especially in today's world. It's such a global world for so many people.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, when it comes to business messaging, there's always that notion, okay, make it as simple and straightforward as possible for people. Don't make it complicated, especially because there's so much noise out there these days.
Mm-hmm.
So is that also something that might play into that whole thinking that you have about what you put out there?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's actually one of the things I've had to learn the hard way, to be honest, because if I thought back about, the way I communicated and, how I wrote, what I said 20 years ago, oh my God, I wanted to tell everybody as much as possible in this 3 minute or whatever amount of time that we're talking. But now I'm like, why do I need to do that? Let's just think about the 3 or 4 things that I need to communicate and just try to focus on that. Of course, I mean, on a conversation like that is different because we talked about how it actually may be more interesting to kind of unload.
Yeah.
But I think it's not everybody can relate. It's not something everybody can relate. I think again, it really depends on the audience.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think so too. And also where you are. Of course, in a podcast space, there's a lot of space for more conversation, but maybe on an Instagram post that will be very different, as an example.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even still, even the medium, the forum, it's the audience, and I think some people may have multiple accounts on Instagram for that reason, or maybe they may even manage multiple podcasts because they know that they talk about different topics.
Yeah. So it's all about understanding who you actually are talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you, for your business, really settle on your customer? How did you understand who they are and what they need from you in terms of the product, but also in terms of the communication?
I think of this actually as like a give and take, or like a balance, like yin and yang, if you. I don't know if yin and yang is probably. I don't think that's a good example. What I'm trying to say is, I think part of it starts with me or any business owner, because when you start a business, inevitably there's going to be parts of it that reflects on who you are. So when I first started, there were definitely things that I would never have incorporated where someone else, another person in the hosiery business might have, which is fine. And through that, you attract certain types of customers. So me, because I was based in Boston and I did work in high tech, I was a woman in the professional business. I tend at the time to attract women or customers who were professionals. And so, had I been, say, for example, a waiter or a waitress, and I started my business, it could possibly be that a lot of my customers, had I started that route, would have also been in the service business. But that wasn't my past. So,
yes.
Right. Through that, so now like I have some customer feedback, some information about my customers who are drawn to me because of who I am. And now I'm taking that information and refining that a little bit just to, produce, package, market, whatever it is, something that will be attractive to those customers. And in through that, now I'm gaining more customers who are more, interested in what we are producing. So it's a very back and forth thing. However, I think one message that a friend of mine had told me is that it is possible for you to be sucked up and to be too consumed with people pleasing. You can't please everybody at the same time. And so at some point, you as a business leader need to think about who you really want to be, which is what we did in the beginning, and just focus on your vision and focus on what you want to do, because through that, again, you'll start, attracting folks who are driven by your vision and what you want to do. And so I think the past, especially during the pandemic, I've mainly been focused on, okay, this is what a lot of customers are asking for, but I can't please everybody. There's people leave that way.
Yes.
But at the same time, I've been really just going deep down as to what I want to do, what I want to achieve for my brand, etc., and just focusing on that and moving forward with that.
So would you say for any business owner, this is like one of the most fundamental parts they should spend time on?
Yes. I mean, one anecdote that I think about too is the Sony Walkman. I think you know what a Walkman is. Not a
I still know. I used to have one.
Yeah, I say that because some kids today, they're like, what? I don't even.
Yes, of course.
So, I think at the time, Sony had hired an agency to do research. Okay, would you ever buy essentially a tape recorder without the recording button? And everybody from that survey had said, no, I wouldn't want to buy this. Why would I want to do that? Well, Sony was like, whatever. And they launched the Walkman, anyway. And they became, so that, to me, that story has stuck with me, because again, it's like, okay, sometimes customers just don't know what they want. Yes, you can, okay, if there's a misspelling on your website, let me know, if
Yes.
let me know, But there are certain things that you need to be the expert. You need to just trust your instinct, your belief, or whatever it is, that you are doing the right thing.
That's very powerful. I'm thinking of, business owners sometimes when it doesn't work right from the start, or it feels like, oh, it's taking time, am I really on the right path? I'm imagining how easy it is to get scared and to start, going off track, because you wonder, is it really?
And I think this is very common for entrepreneurs, which is, we're great at just picking up and doing things, right? But you get so distracted because you want to do everything.
Yeah.
And so, you just focus on, like, I mean, even I myself, as I'm saying this, I'm like, okay, I need to think about the areas that I have told myself these are the things that are important, and not sweat the little things. And so it's definitely not easy, that's for sure, especially for an entrepreneur who gets excited and wants to do everything,
Yes. So how do you filter, or how do you keep yourself accountable when it comes to these,
great question. So I am I love spreadsheets, and I sound stupid, geeky, and I don't know, clunky, but I keep everything on a spreadsheet. I have like a prioritization. I'm like, okay, because when left to my own devices, I love lists to begin with, and I can have lists everywhere. But if I have everything in a consolidated spreadsheet, and I think about, okay, is this really a high priority? There was a time in my spreadsheet that I would actually even go back and categorize, like, okay, this is considered operations. Maybe I can outsource this. Maybe, this is, I don't mean outsource as in sending it overseas, as in like not doing it myself.
Yeah, like delegate to someone else.
Delegate, that's the better word, delegate. And then, I categorize like what these tasks are and then prioritize. I still do that, but the categorization, you now have to spend another 15, 20 minutes on it. You're like, okay, forget it. so let me just
time is precious.
So let me just have the list of priority. I think more importantly, like, think about when's it due, because that impacts the prioritization of your focus. And then you're like, after having a list, you think about, okay, some of these things aren't really important. I don't need to do it. Or just move the deadline out, move it out to 2 weeks or something, or whatever,
Yes. So that's how you work. You have your one place where you have all your priorities, and then you move them around depending with
Yeah.
how you feel they make sense. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's a great
Well,
advice
I
because
wouldn't say feel either though, because some of
yes.
it is based on business's needs. And so it's,
Hmm.
oh wow, if I focus on this, it's way more beneficial for the business than
Yes.
worrying about this. I would love to be able to react based on how I felt because I mean, and in some ways I do, to be honest.
Hmm.
But certainly if it's a big impact on your business, then you feel compelled to work on it. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
it's one and the same.
Yeah, but there's another important point in what you just said. So sometimes it might happen to an entrepreneur that they would love to go a certain way, but then when they look at all the tasks at hand, they say like, okay, this is not really my most exciting thing, but I know it will take the business forward, so I'm going to prioritize this.
Yes. Yes. I mean, and then if you have that list, you start to see patterns. And so, for me, I start, okay, I don't need to be, worry about, I don't know, the little things all the time. Maybe I could set a time once a month to do all of this stuff,
Mm,
whatever it is, filing, I don't know, or um yeah, I think I do believe in list and having a system that you can think about the prioritization and um your accomplishment. That way you can say, okay, was this really good? Well, in the future I won't do this again.
yes.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that's clear, but just I don't want to call it journaling, but just entering without having analysis paralysis, of information, a, a, a method where you can balance what you need to do, how long it's taken you to do something, and the value of it, in a way that you can review it and act upon it is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this reflection on, okay, did this go well? And is that then something I want to
Yes,
do?
reflection. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure there
Another,
are better systems than spreadsheet. I'm sure there are way, way, way more complicated. But for me, I think sometimes simple is good, and I don't want to. Yeah, I just use spreadsheet.
use it. Yeah. I mean, I still know many people, even today, who love spreadsheets, although there are all these apps. And some people love the newer versions, others love spreadsheets. I think it also is, again, like what fits with you, and what makes you accomplish what you have to accomplish in
Mhm.
your business. And if it's a spreadsheet that works best, then
Yes.
go for it.
Mhm.
Another thing that popped into my mind, because right in the beginning of the conversation, you talked about that, before you had a family, that's when you decided, okay, now is the time to start the business.
Mhm. No, sorry about
So,
that.
oh,
I
that's
had that,
okay.
thought I had that on mute, but go ahead. Sorry.
No problem. So, right in the beginning of the conversation, you spoke about, before you had a family, that's when you said, okay, now is the right time for me to start this business. So now that you have a family and are even a mom, like, how has it changed, the way you operate your business or the way you divide your time? Is there something different now?
It's a good question. Because in the past, I thought, oh my gosh, this is no better time than now. However,
Mm,
now with, a kid and my husband, I feel that it's actually even more important to get things done for multiple
mm,
reasons. I don't want to, at the risk of sounding like I am on a high horse, um, you know, your child sees you as their role model, and so I always want to throw up when I say that, but
no, it's okay. Go for it.
at the same time, you have to get into good habits because if you want them to, do to be good, I guess you have to. You're responsible for what they see, and so
Hmm.
um, I don't want to become, someone who would say, hey, I didn't do this because you were the reason why I didn't do something. It's like, okay, I want you to see that even when I was 5 months pregnant with you, I was doing all these things, so I want them to see mommy and daddy working hard. And so what does that mean to prioritization? I think it just means structure, planning and structure. I think planning is even more important now. It's especially with the child, it's very easy to let things go chaotically, and like maybe he does need a nap at this time. Maybe he does, but it's like, no, he absolutely needs a nap because I need my sanity, So I think being, I hate to say organized because I'm not an organized person by all means in nature, but because of my business and because of my family, it forces me to be organized. And that's actually quite important if you want to get things done.
Yes. So it's interesting what you're saying. Like, it's saying normally you're not necessarily the most organized person, but you sort of get down to do things because that's how then the outcome will be what you desire.
Yes, absolutely. And also, you end up spinning, you're spinning, or you end up not being efficient if you're not organized, unfortunately. And so I still, the other thing too, actually, now that I think about it a bit more, is you think about what's important to you and you make time for it. I think, especially if you have a business and you have a family, you're like, do I have to do all these little other things? Do I have to clean the house? Yes, I do. But how about we find somebody who can help us do X, Y, Z? Because that time you get back, I mean, I still am in some ways. I'm somebody who's like, I can do it all. I don't need help. I can do it all. But then
many women are.
Yes. But you don't want to, I just don't want to seem like I'm the person complaining about not having enough time. But you're like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have enough time. So the value of someone being able to help you and asking for help becomes even more and more important. So yes, finding good help is invaluable.
Yes. And did you have to learn that the hard way, or was that something that came easy to you?
Oh, I want to say the hard way, because just because of the nature of who I am, I want to do everything myself. But at the same time, there are definitely times where I'm like, okay, hey, could you do this? Could you do that for me? But I think through experience, when you delegate, sometimes you're like disappointed, which reinforces you to do everything yourself. So, but the lesson I should have learned whenever I delegate and get disappointment isn't I should never delegate ever again. It's how do you find the right assignment for the right person, and how do you find the right? It's the vetting process that is actually more important than delegating. I think you can't do everything. Yes, I have learned that the hard way, but how to delegate to the right person is a lot harder than it sounds. But it's
I think that's a very important point you are making, not only in terms of, once you are a mother and you want to get help to make everything work, but I think also in business, it's so crucial to make the right decisions about who will do which task, and how do I actually create a process where I can vet persons, people the right way.
Yes. And that's, part of it's really important to get to know the folks you're working with, suppliers, a perfect example. I've definitely, the relationship with folks that I have spent the time getting to know, they have been there for me many, many, many times. Where like, oh, I got to know them, but now they're leaving. Oh no, and now my account is drifted off to somebody else. That relationship isn't so great. Am I gonna be on top of their list when I need help? Probably not. And so, but that's vendor management. But my point is, when you work with somebody, you do really need to build that relationship and get to know them. That is really important.
Yeah. Are there any like best practices you now have based on your experience as a mother who is also a business owner on how to vet? Let me put it that way. Also, it sounds quite harsh, but
it is vetting. It's give and take. I think naturally for me, I want to believe that someone is thinking, it wants to think of you and wants to help you. But the reality is not everybody wants to. And so, the thing I think about is technical skills can be trained, but attitude you cannot change. And so the vetting process, if you will, that I try to focus on is to read between the lines and see what their attitude is towards life, themselves, actually, more importantly, themselves. Do they care about themselves? Are they just someone who doesn't take themselves seriously? Because if you don't take yourself seriously, you're not going to take my work seriously. And I try to focus on folks that have that are curious, because the more curious you are, the more you realize, oh my goodness, the less I know about the world, the more I want to learn. That's a great attitude. Then you're like, well, wait a minute. Now you're stuck with someone who's asking you 900 questions an hour. I don't mean it that way. I mean, there's a part that you have to like, hey, figure it out yourself. You got to balance that. But at the same time, I value somebody who's asking me 900 questions, and I hope I'm not going to regret this.
No.
Versus someone who thinks they are know-it-all, because know-it-all presumptuous attitude you cannot change. And we just try not to work with folks that are like that. Now I'm sure there are other places that are like, okay, this is perfect. I need someone who is presumptuous and is told exactly what they need to do. But as a small business, I can't afford that. I have to have somebody who is a little bit agile in the way they think, who is curious, who is dependable, who can take the initiative and do the stuff and you figure things out. And I think that is actually part of the vetting process as well. One of the first thing that we ask is, are you aspiring to be working at a big company or a small company? Because if you want to work for a global conglomerate, this ain't it.
Yes.
And I don't think it's any beneficial to you to have a company like mine to show up on your resume. Whereas if you're somebody who's like, hey, I just want to learn. I don't know what I don't know, but I stumble upon learning what I want to do. It's a rare attitude, but it's a better attitude to work with, at least in my book, because it's a better fit. One analogy we also use too is that, if you're trying to go to Canada, which is where I'm trying to go to and having flight issues, but anyway, you can't drive south of the United States, because that's not where Canada is. So that's part of the vetting process of, do you want to work for a big company? Do you want to work for a small company? What direction in your life, as ambiguous as that sound, do you want to go? Because if there's isn't a fit here, then we're not doing any of us a favor, just forcing us to be together. But the problem is, a lot of times, and I have been in this situation where people settle. I mean, I have settled. I'm like, oh, you need to do something for the next year or two, and you don't know what it is. This may be a good opportunity, even though you want to be in pharma. Okay, sure. Whoops. We've learned that multiple times, where that big picture was the elephant in the room. We should have known that this is just not the right opportunity.
Yeah. And then staying, again, it's a bit of a story of staying on track, right? Sometimes you need someone, and then maybe other parts fit really well. And
Yeah, I mean,
then you say yes. Yeah.
You're never gonna find 100% fit. Can you? But it's like, what's the difference that you can live with?
Yes.
So directional difference is and what I mean is, like, if generally there's a direction that you both you, as in my company that's hiring, and the person, employee and employer, is going in the same direction, then that's great. But fortunately, it's like, okay, I want to be in the auto industry. So I'm like, what do you here? That's different direction altogether.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense. So if the general direction is the same, sort of visions and all that fit, then there's a higher chance that generally it will work out if we choose someone. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, is there anything that you feel you want to give the audience, like a last, thought about business, motherhood, identity, all the interesting topics we spoke today about? I'm asking a lot of you.
Yeah.
Some words of wisdom or something that comes to mind that you would like to share.
I recently read that, like, what you do or how you live your life is something you plan 3 to 5 years before. So my point is, like, if you're doing planning and prioritizing, try to think a little further than just 6 months. I think depending on, the book, I guess, depending on which book. Some people are like 90 days, the next year, or 5 years. I think 3 years is probably a good time frame to think about, like, okay, is my action today going to impact something I do or how I live in 3 years from now? Because it will. And how will it? And can you live with that?
Yeah.
So, that's something I read recently, and that really resonated with me. And so that's going to be definitely something that I'll be thinking more and more about. It's like, oh, I should have, but yes, I should have, sure. But I think it more than ever, I think it's important.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful and very powerful, because also, it takes a while for our dreams to sometimes materialize. So, looking ahead into the future and being more clear about that as well is something that can have a huge impact, definitely.
Yeah, and also, it's not set it and forget it. You have to review your actions every few months. Like, am I totally off track? Am I off?
Yeah.
Because you want to kind of pull yourself back if you're going off the rails.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for those last words of wisdom, Vienne. That was very, very insightful. And thank you for the lovely conversation.